All right. Welcome back. This is the Black Muze Podcast. I am your host, Jason Muse, aka the Black Muse. Very excited for today's stream, which we're doing live, but it's also simultaneously being recorded because we are going to talk about something I've been meaning to talk about for a while. But before we get into the topic proper, I want to bring in my two guests who are part of an all Black male panel to discuss the issue, which shall be named soon. The first person I want to bring on is somebody that I met on a social audio app called Clubhouse. He's also been a guest on the Black Muze Podcast before. It is the man, the legend, none other than Dre Mack. Dre Mack,
What's
how you
going
doing?
What's going on?
How you living, man?
I'm good. Let me change
Good to have you.
something.
Good to have you back on the stream, and I hopefully we can start doing collabos on pop culture, on blur stuff, because I know that's your forte. And
Yes, sir.
I'm staying in the political lane right now, but eventually I want to jump over to that.
Awesome. Let's do it.
For my second guest, I have another person who is also returning. He was on a prior episode of the Black Muze Podcast, somebody that I used to work with, and somebody with whom our relationship has ebbed and flowed over time, but I think it's blossomed into something very meaningful, at least for me. It is a man, none other than Malik Brown. How you doing, Malik?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing good, man. Great to have you back on the stream. Been a cool minute. How you living?
I'm good, man. One day at a time. I
Just
do
taking one
appreciate
day.
you giving me the opportunity, and I do appreciate being able to look at that documentary.
That's what's up. Which is a great actual segue to the topic. So what we are here to talk about or discuss is a recent documentary published by none other than Candace Owens, and I also believe those of the Daily Wire. It's a conservative documentary called "The Greatest Lie Ever Sold," and it is detailing not only what happened in the kind of summer of 2020 with the George Floyd protests, but also what has become of the 90 million plus funds that the Black Lives Matter Global Foundation, I believe it's called, has collected, and whether or not that money was used wisely or used in a way that actually benefits in some measurable way the Black community. There's been a lot of controversy surrounding those things. To what extent looting and rioting are valid forms of protest, given what the issues that they are protesting, some things like police brutality, things like problems and systemic problems in our criminal justice system that negatively and disproportionately impact Black people, etc. We mean to talk about all of the nitty gritty. We mean to take a deep dive into those things. And in the final polished version, I will be splicing clips from the actual documentary into here. But for in the meantime, what we're going to do is we're going to refer to clips, provided that I can scroll through and find what we're referring to real quick. So it'll be easier for me to just put it in and post. But if we need to refer to something, or you guys want me to like find something, I have it queued here for us to do so. So without further ado, are y'all ready to have this discussion?
Yeah, let's go.
Yes, sir.
All right. So again, the name of the documentary is "The Greatest Lie Ever Sold." Now, I do hear a lot of the critiques as far as what Candace Owens is focusing on. I also vehemently disagree on certain things she chooses to focus on because I don't think that those are the real issue. In particular, Candace Owens starts off the documentary showing clips from a viral video that she had, I believe, on IG Live, um, going over all of her reasons why she is disgusted by what she claims is a part of a general trend of the Black community taking criminals and making heroes out of them, and or making martyrs out of them. And I think the reason why she feels that that's outrageous or disgusting is because, in some sense, uh, it's a diminution of our community that we value the wrong things. And this is a common trope, I think, amongst conservative Blacks, which is that the Black community is guilty. Not all of them, not universally, but a lot of them,
No,
like Larry Elders
I
and stuff.
got you. I just think I agree. I just want to expand it. I think it's a common issue with politics and media facing people in general. This idea that everybody can't have a background. If you're, you know what I mean. But go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I want to get you in, but I just want to just to finish the thought. Yeah, I think it's a common trope, but specifically levied by the likes of Candace Owens and Larry Elder, those types. Um, that we have a culture problem, and the only thing holding Black people back are elements of our culture that are toxic that we perpetuate and reify. Um, and that feeds into, I think, this bootstrap ideology, which is if we would just get out of our own way, we would be able to succeed in the greatest country in the world, America first, rah, rah, MAGA that, MAGA this, MAGA that. I think that there is a substantive critique of that point of view. And I wanted to lead with that because it's the extent to which I actually disagree vehemently with people on the right in general, but with Candace Owens in particular. I think that they've misconstrued fundamentally the nature of how systemic problems impact people. And it's not just a matter of bootstrapping your way out of things. I do think, though, that there is room also in tandem with systemic forces to talk about personal responsibility and the agency that Black people have and the bad decisions that we often make that negatively impact ourselves. There's space to talk about that too. What we don't like, though, and where the people left of center have a point in disagreeing with Candace Owens is if you want to talk about that exclusively and ignore systemic factors that have negatively set Black people back historically and all of the ripple effects that still continue to now in 2022, that you're not
and
having
your position in continuing that, because she's definitely, as much as she talks about tokenism, she plays into the token stuff all the time.
Fair enough. But there's substantive critique to be had even of that side. So this is me kind of being in the middle, but genuinely so, not just for the sake of this conversation. I genuinely believe everything I just said. So with that, I want to throw it to you first, you Malik, and then after Dre. What are your thoughts on kind of the position?
I mean, if you're gonna throw it to me, let me just speak. So I know that you have the general questions. I want you to ask that, but I want to respond to what you were saying.
That's what I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you to respond to what I just said. I'm asking you to respond to what I just said.
Okay, my bad. So I think that my issue with Candace Owens within that critique of like we are trying to martyr a criminal. I think what I'm trying to figure out is like, so what is your end game? What is your perfect world? Like, is your perfect world in which we have the people that we martyr are people that don't have any type of history of like things that you could say that they did wrong? Because that would be nobody. Furthermore, you can't point to anybody on either what white people do or with anybody's subset of people. History has a lot to do with like who's telling the story, right? Even the presidents have histories of doing different things. And so I think that it's okay to talk about the idea of drug use and whether or not he was using drugs and to give a full picture, because I think that's fine. But I think this idea of, well, now, because it comes off as like, well, he deserves what he got because of whatever, right? And I think that that's kind of the problem. And I think that another issue I have with Candace Owens is that like she played in the beginning Dave Chappelle, and I'm a stan Dave Chappelle, so that's just what that is. So that's a side note. Like I don't think he could do too much wrong, but when he was saying like I don't care what he did, he didn't deserve to die the way he died, right? And even if you go with the idea that he was overdosed, if I'm running with her idea that he had took too many drugs and he was in a mix of overdosing, right? How that situation was handled contributed to his death, and that should be the bottom line. And I think the issue I have with her is that there's and this is the same issue I have with you sometimes, is attempt to be quote unquote in the middle or be objective, you lose empathy. And I think as a Black woman, if she wants to talk about other Black women capitalizing on the Black deaths of people, she's doing the same shit. And I think that I wonder if there could be a little bit, because I'm interested enough in Candace Owens to wonder if she could do a deep dive into understanding like how much she's playing into a lot of the tropes that she's saying that she's trying to call out. But nevertheless, I did also appreciate being able to look at where they were doing with spending the money, and I think that it did give me a perspective change on how I see Black Lives Matter, because I was already from a curriculum point of view, like when I tried to pull some of their curriculum to do some of the work we were doing in over at KIP. I already had some like intellectual issues, but now that I'm seeing what they're doing with the money, I feel like I feel like that type of stuff does need to be exposed. So I do appreciate her for that.
Dre, I want you to get in as well and opine on some of your thoughts. You can respond to what I said, or you can kind of give your own thoughts or respond to some things that Malik said.
Yeah. So I believe what Malik said was 100% right. we can look at that as she's playing into the same games that she's saying these other people are doing. Now, when the documentary starts, again, I'm gonna just explain this and make it real quick. I was triggered because I was shot at by a police officer when I was 17 years old on my way to K State. A football scholarship, theater scholarship. Um, I was in my community. I was doing. I was working with I was 17, and this is before you got any credits for being out in the community doing community stuff. So I was working with a group called STRAP, which stand for Students Together Rising Against Packing Pieces. I was working alongside the YWCA at that time. I was working in my community with different type of activists to try to see after the death of my friend, what kind of things that we could be able to change in our community. So we didn't have young kids dying over, trivial, things that could have been avoided. There's work that needs to be done. And when that situation happened to me, because I would tell you, I'm gonna keep this brief, but I ran from a cop in my car. I didn't want to pull over. He's trying to pull me over for speeding. And for some reason, I don't know if I thought this was Dukes of Hazzard or whatever the fact, but I took off on it. Wrong decision. That was my fault. Him pulling me out the car and deciding to shoot was not my fault. That's why I could be able to be here and talk about this. And anytime I see this with George Floyd, because that's the first thing that you see on the documentary, it is triggering. Just like Philando Castile's situation was very triggering. So it was triggering. But for this particular reason, after I got out of my mess and we come to find out that, the in my case, we had a situation where the cop lied on the stand. So I didn't say I got off, but I got my record expunged because of what happened. And with this particular situation, I see what the cop tried to do to subdue Mr. Floyd. And I worked years later, 6 years later, as a corrections officer. And we were trained by KCPD. And I was talking to Jason about this off camera, that we were trained by KCPD. And KCPD shows you each technique to be able to handle and subdue a person. And I worked at a jail where it was an open jail. So it's easy to be able to show you how to subdue a person. Where the cop made a mistake at is that when instead of putting his knee on his neck, if he would have put his hand or his forearm right here and held him down, or what we was told is it's a snake technique. Like the way that you handle a snake is by the neck. So if he would have held him down with two hands, not pressing on his spine, on his actual neck, but you're really just holding him down, literally pressing your thumbs against his shoulders and holding him down while still putting your knee towards the side of his back, you wouldn't have had a situation with George Floyd. But in that moment, because, he's being harassed by the people filming, they say, hey, dude's telling you to get up, he can't breathe. And his ego got the best of him. This is why George Floyd is where, this is why he passed. So when she puts up this clip of literally a blink if you miss it, oh no, the body cam shows that his knee was on his shoulder. Dude, it's a blink if you miss it. But we also have the camera shot of 9 minutes of this man on his neck. So that narrative that she was trying to paint on George Floyd is kind of unfair to say that he kind of, because he was high, there's a way that there's verbal judo and there's a way that you handle particular people, whether he's high or he's mentally ill patient. There's still ways to handle that. And it was handled terribly wrong. It is what it is.
No, and I think that, because I'm glad that you're able to bring the expertise around the specifics around what it would take for you to be able to switch the way that you actually handle that situation. That's one thing. Yeah. I think from my point of view, I think there's a way that you treat human beings that you're not scared of.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a way that you treat human beings with empathy when you're law enforcement and you know that you're there to serve and you're not there to dictate. You know what I mean? And so my thing is like, you don't have to nobody has to tell me in every state the different ways that their procedures are to handle that situation. We already know that when that cops know how to make people who just shot somebody come back alive. You know what I mean? So it's like that wasn't done, and I think it kind of throws the idea of not just bootstraps, but this idea that, and I thought that's where you were going with your story, that even if you are the person that is in the community and going to K-State and doing those things, you're still liable because you're black. As Jay-Z would say, niggas, you still nigga.
And in my particular case, when they're talking about the media, and this is the part where I disagreed with Candace, is that they was like, they made Derek Chevron Chauvin. They made him, he did all these wonderful things. He was a great police officer, and the media made him a monster. Well, what do you think that they did to me? And what do you think that they do to everyone who is guilty before proven innocent? This is what the media does.
Yeah.
So I do agree with her. This says, because she opened up with the Malcolm X quote. You know what I'm saying? It ended with the Malcolm X quote about the media. The media does paint everyone in the negative. That's their job. I hate to tell you that, but the job is it's almost like clickbait. It's to get you invested or to get you pointed into a narrative to be able to figure out what side of the coin you on, whether you on or whether you're on the left or right, whether you A or B, it doesn't matter. They want you to get on a narrative.
I will modify that slightly. I think that there's such a thing as media bias, and so the media, relative to their bias, will paint people in a negative light, but they also will paint people in a positive light who perhaps don't deserve it as well. And that's usually a reflection of their bias in terms of presenting figures publicly. This is especially true when it comes to politics. So if you have left-leaning media outlets, they tend to be very, very slow to be publicly critical of people who are left-leaning or who are on their side politically. The same is true of reverse of right-leaning sources. So Fox News tends to be slow to criticize right-leaning figures in general than they are left-leaning figures. And I think that's a manifestation of political bias that's kind of writ large. But also, these biases don't have to be political. They can be racial. There's all kinds of ways that you can be biased in the media. And so I think the media will paint people that they're biased towards favorably and biased against negatively.
Yeah, but I think that's why I'm okay with listening to Candace Owens or anybody else, because I would like to be able to form an opinion myself, right? And I think that doing that on either side is problematic. Like that's kind of the issue. Like, and that, like, I don't think that anybody, like, I think that her interrogating his character instead of just staying with the facts of what happened is the problem. And that's one of the ways in which the right goes into the right leaning is or not just the right, both sides do that. Like they'll try to excuse somebody by saying, oh, well, he's a great person. Or they'll try to demonize somebody by saying, well, see, obviously he deserved an X, Y, and Z. And I think that in itself is messed up, right? Like that's the problem right there.
I think she was, and again, I'm not defending her because anybody could watch this for themselves. I'm giving a logical thought on this. My thinking was she was trying to point out that we don't need to use this person as a martyr. And that's what she kept saying. This guy is not a hero. We're painting him as a hero. And my thought when she said that is like, okay, first of all, he's still a human being no matter what he's done. You know what I mean? Prior to, and I understand she pointed out that he was a part of a home invasion, and some little 7-year-old boy pointed him out and said, yeah, that was Mr. Floyd that came and robbed me, or whatever the fact. He did his crime. I mean, he did the crime, did the time, so we need to point that out too. Did he go to jail for this? Did he do his time? And what you were talking about, the empathy portion of it, yes, she does have to point out the empathetic side of this, like, okay, he's still a human being. And just because he has this criminal record, just because he's high on, I don't care if he's high on crack, fentanyl, meth, you know what I'm saying, weed, all of it together. is how do you treat the human being? And you
Right.
cannot treat the human being less than, I understand not making him Martin Luther King. I get that. But you can't treat him and go publicly and say, this man was a criminal. This man was, and that's the problem that I had with
Yeah.
Kansas when that happened. You know
Yeah,
what
because
I mean?
my thing is, what is the implication of that? The implication of saying, oh, well, he was a criminal, which is basically saying, well, he got what he deserved, right? That's the issue I have with.
Well, to be fair though, she explicitly said that's not what I'm saying in her rant, and I've watched the entire rant several times. She said, "I'm not saying that George Floyd deserved to die. I don't care how long your rap sheet is. No one deserves to die." She said something to that effect.
Yeah, she did. She
and I
that
actually think that clip was actually put in the beginning of the documentary.
Yes.
But what her beef seemed to be and I'm only trying to steelman her position based on what I heard her say. Not because I still disagree with it, but I'm just trying to steelman it. I think the way she argued, her main concern is why do we have all of these examples of hero worship for a person who is guilty of all of these atrocities, that the very same people who ideologically right now are building statues to his name, putting them on shirts, saying his name, like they even would disagree vehemently with the stuff that he did. And I think that's an interesting question.
But can we can not to cut you off real quick, but I wanted to just make this point. Can we actually say the same thing about the history of this country? How they clearly have statues of people who have done atrocities, especially black people in America, and people say, well, that's my history. And totally we ignore the fact of what they did to said people. You see what I mean?
There's a similarity there, but there are also facets of it that are different because of the nature of our, how do I say this? Well, I'll save it because I don't want to go into another discussion. I will say that there are some key differences that we ought not forget. However, there are substantive similarities, and so I like the comparison in virtue of the similarities, just in the same way that the people that we erect as heroes in history have a dark past, and we seem to have normed on like ignoring their atrocities in favor of whatever they're supposed to have contributed. Why can't we do that for George Floyd? That's the crux of what you're saying. I understand that, and I wanted to acknowledge that. But go ahead.
Yeah, so I think there's an episode of Atlanta, season 3, episode 4, my favorite one, called "The Big Payback," and it's about reparations. Has anybody seen that?
No, I just seen the episode where Kevin Samuels was on there, but that's it.
Okay, so that was in the same season, and that was one of the anthology episodes, and this is the second anthology episode that I'm talking about. And there is a character that he uses, black woman character he uses as basically the person that is championing getting the reparations, right? And the thing about her is she's your stereotypical really loud black woman that's just acting all ghetto and doing the most or whatever, right? And a lot of people were put off by like, damn, man, like out of all the images you got to put up there of black women, why you got to put that image up there? Because she was the one that was going to get ready to get reparations, because in the episode a law passed, it became legally precedent for people to figure out if your ancestors had enslaved their ancestors, so now they could sue you for your money. So she was suing the main white character in that episode for his money. She was loud and obnoxious and X, Y, and Z. And I think that the reason why he put that in there is because in the United States, we have not only a meritocracy system that doesn't make any sense, but we have this exceptionalism thing where like, it's kind of like the Bill Cosby pull your pants up thing. It's like, well, I need to make sure that I pull my pants up and that I have a lineup and I do all these professionalism things in order to be treated like a human being. And I think that that's the issue, is that we need to be treating similar to when me and Jason was at the school. We don't get to treat the kids that are doing what we tell them to do with respect. We treat everybody with respect because human beings deserve respect. And I think that's the issue, regardless of whether or not she's saying that's not what she's doing. That is what you do when you bring up, when something happens to somebody, if a student disrespects me, right? And I bring up to the mom that, well, the student's been doing all these bad things or whatever, right? Like, and I'm talking about the student's character or whatever, right? Then I'm taking away from the fact that I did something wrong to the student if I was yelling at them or whatever, right? Because I'm trying to deflect and make it seem like it's one thing that it's not. And I think that that's the problem we have with the United States, is that in general too, is that we are always looking for a logic to show that the people the people who are being treated or being marginalized deserve it because of their own inherent fallacy. And I think that that's the problem with her.
You mean
talking
fallibility?
about it at all.
You mean fallibility? Huh? Fallibility?
Yes, or really just character flaws, idiosyncratic like character flaws in general. Like I think that that's the issue, and I think that the problem with that is it doesn't make sense, because it doesn't matter. Like if you have systems, or like if you have a culture in place that sees me as a black man as an inherent threat just because I'm a black man, it doesn't matter if I went to Clark Atlanta and I got my graduate degree out of LMU and X, Y, and Z. Nobody's going to see that, right? Like people are going to treat me however they're going to treat me. And so like the issue at hand is the treatment of George Floyd in that situation. I don't care about
do you
the
think that it was
cops.
solely because he was a black man, or was there more to it than that?
Well, I'm gonna tell you.
It's because of how he was treated, right? And what that speaks to how black men are treated.
Well,
and
I'm not denying that. Hold on, I'm not denying that that's relevant. But the pushback that I'm trying to offer is I'm trying to push you to think about these other nuances too. I don't know how accurate it is, and I'm being genuine right now. I don't know how accurate it is to say of George Floyd that the sole reason why he was perceived as a threat in those moments, given what we saw in the body cam footage, was because he was a black man, or even because he was a big, well-built black man, and whatever threat that might imply in terms of whatever damage he might be able to do, because that to me seems to turn a blind eye to how erratic he was acting.
No, he was also doing something illegal, right? And he had a counterfeit bill, which is real. Like those are all the
I'm not
things
talking about wait. I want to be very clear about what I'm saying. I'm not talking about the bill right now. I'm talking about how erratic he was acting.
Okay,
when they
so
tried to put him in the back of the seat. Hold on, wait. Because I think it would be reasonable for anyone, no matter what their skin color, who's acting that way, to perceive them as a possible threat. And if you're acting in the line of duty. So if we don't take that into account, then it makes it easier to make claims like the sole reason that they perceived George Floyd as a threat was because he was a black man. And I don't know how accurate that is.
Okay, so let me just kind of give you kind of from that world of law enforcement that was in for 4 years. We were taught when a guy comes in, we're the city jail, so everybody's coming in from the city or whatever, and we take them to court. You got to treat them as criminals. Don't be engaging in conversation. You got to separate the two. And this is from the senior officer that was training me day one. By year 4, I still have to talk, and I learned this from older guys who was there, who was like, no, these are still human beings. You have to treat them as such. Just because they could be doing the most horrific thing while they're in your care, you still have to treat them as such. So I had one senior officer that's training me was like, no, you if they do something, just as the way you handle it, you go in there and it suits your authority. And then I had one other person that was the same color as me. That's not how you do it. If you want something done, you have to be able to not necessarily come on their level, but you have to be able to put yourself in their shoes and show that empathy and be able to still guide them and lead them to where they need to go to be able to get the best result. So because I understand what you're saying, Jason, is that the perceived notion that the detectives came in there and the big black man acting a fool, you know what I'm saying? We got to perceive this as a threat. They have to think like that. They're taught to think everything that's erratic is a threat. So I'm with you. I can't say that they put that as far as being black, but I do know there's a little bit more sting with it when you go to, hold on, wait a minute. When you go to a black community and you're not from that neighborhood or that area, that they try to, no, you got to hammer this home. You can't treat them. You got to treat them like this.
Quick correction. I think it would also be false to say that perceiving George Floyd as a big black man had no bearing on their perception of him as a threat. Like, I think that goes too far on the other extreme. What I was trying to say was that that saying that that's the only reason why they saw him as a threat isn't quite accurate either. So again, this is me being in the middle between two extremes. One extreme is he was only perceived as a threat because he was behaving in a way that reasonably one would perceive as a threat. That's one extreme. The other one is he was only perceived as a threat solely because he was black.
No, so what I'm saying
wrong.
with mine is that I can see, like, obviously he was acting a certain kind of way, but what I'm saying is that, and I think I always hear it when Dre talks, is that there's a certain way that you treat human beings, and I feel like him being a well-built black man compounded upon the issue in a way that doesn't need to be compounded upon at all. And I think that's kind of why it's easier to say, well, it's because he's black. It's like, it's not because you're black. It's like even with Dre's situation, when black people do something wrong, the way that we get hammered down is different than when everybody else does something wrong. And I don't think that because not even that I don't think, it's just, I've seen it, like, period. In interactions, period. I don't think that if he was a small white woman acting that way with the same circumstances, he would have been treated. That person would have been treated the same way.
White woman. What if he was built like and looked like John Cena?
I still don't think that he would have been treated. I still don't think he would have ended up dead.
I have no idea whether he would have ended up dead, but would he have been perceived as a threat? I think sincerely.
I don't think he was,
because anybody who's built like John Cena is going to be perceived. At least there's a high potential that police officers are going to perceive them as a threat, not because of their color, but because they're being built like that.
No. You don't have to explain that. I understand that. I understand that, and that's reasonable. And I think I might have went to a little bit of the extreme by saying a small white woman. But what I mean is that there are certain things that I think we generally agree shouldn't contribute to whether or not you think something's a greater risk or not, and whether or not somebody's a bigger built person does. I think we can say that does. Somebody who's 230, who's built like LeBron James, is more threatening, or physically threatening, that is, to somebody who's smaller, right? Like me, right? And so that's fine. But I think that what I'm trying to say is compounding is that he was black. Him being a well-built black man is what compounds, right? And I think, again,
I agree with that. I agree with that.
And I think that and again, to go to what my critique of Candace Owens is I feel like as a black woman, and I feel like within the conservative movement, they don't have that empathy piece around understanding the shared experience of, like, we are treated differently. They want to live in a world in which, no, it's just because of my merit, it's just because of my virtues. If my character is right, then I will be treated in this, like, colorblind way. And even if they have, because there are exceptions, gotten to a certain platforms or certain levels socioeconomically or whatever, with that mentality, they're losing the impact. Like, even with me, like, I'm okay. I'm doing okay with that. Doesn't keep me from empathizing and realizing through my own experiences that does happen to people, especially the most vulnerable people, right? Because there's other things that compound, like being in poverty compounds it.
Well, let me establish what I'm trying to get. So I think that part of what makes this difficult to discuss sometimes is the unique historical trajectory, let's call it, for lack of a better term, of Black people in America has extensive periods where Black people were objectively and undeniably treated differently in various different ways, but especially with respect to the law and the way that they were policed than other groups. And so our knowledge of that long history is informing our perceptions of how these things are done even today. Because fundamentally, there is a large contingent of people who, I think fairly understandably, suspect, if not outright just believe blindly without any evidence whatsoever, that those things have been mainly preserved. Those kinds of ways of treating Black people by police have been mainly preserved with very little change all the way until now. And I think that that's a little bit extreme. However, I do think that there are a bunch of instances that we could cite where Black people were mistreated by police, and I think that we can prove it. I don't think every
I think that there's the actual epigenetics of that trauma. So that's actually passed down. It's not just that we think the trauma is actually passed down. And on the other end too.
Wait, let me finish, dude. I'm almost done before you respond. Like, what I'm trying to say is every single instance where people generally, particularly in the court of public opinion, perceive that an injustice has been done against a Black person ain't necessarily true. And we need to be able to talk about that with just as much comfortability as we're able to talk about the instances where something has been perpetrated wrong, some tangible harm that was unjust has been perpetrated against a Black person. That should color our discussion. But I think a lot of people, their biases are shaped and informed by what you call the epigenetics of the trauma. But what I'm saying is a long history that we recognize and that is objectively and very well documented. There's no denying that this history exists. There's a long history of that informs our perception of how we historically have related to police, that a lot of people are projecting onto situations now in contemporary times where they don't necessarily apply. And that's why we need to be a little bit more thorough in our investigation of each one of these cases. Number one. Last point. Number two, I actually want to introduce a case where a white person was treated very similarly 2 months prior to George Floyd, in particular, in almost precisely the same way George Floyd was treated, but it didn't get nearly the coverage that George Floyd got. And I want to pose a question to you about why do you think that is?
Okay, so I'm glad we transitioned to that because I was getting ready to continue to disagree on that on a couple of different things.
Well, I want you to continue to disagree if you want to. I'm not trying to leave it.
It's too small of a point because I just think that you're making it seem like it's something that happened in the history, like because this has happened so much, and we both can agree, yes, it's been documented, but it's still happening. It's not something that's just history. It happens every single day, in which people who have biases against Black people are systemically.
I mean,
what's up?
Does it happen as frequently as it used to?
Yes, it happens as frequently as it used to. Like, what's this weird ass
So there's no difference in the frequency with which Black people are let's say harmed or perpetrated against by police.
If you mean the severity.
I'm not saying severity. I'm talking about how
at the
often.
same level. Like, it doesn't happen. It is like people, like Black people, like people can't just get away with being racist nowadays and just openly doing it. But people do that type of stuff all the time.
Let me just interject real quick. Let me just interject.
Wait, no. Wait, sorry. But that has implications for the answer to my question, which is it seems like you're tacitly admitting, without explicitly admitting it, that it happens less often.
I don't believe it happens less often.
No, I'm not saying it happens less often. I'm saying the severity is the way that racism is now is way more sophisticated and less severe, less upfront. But it doesn't mean that it's that the frequency has gone down.
Now, you guys are from the Bay Area. You know the situation that had happened in Oakland with police brutality and stuff like that from the 1970s and go on. I mean, from the 60s to 70s. You know what I'm saying, on forward. And you know what has happened in California as far as policing. It is a policing issue when you go in and say these people are inherently troublemakers, so you have to treat them as such. When you're being taught that from the academy on to, are you with your I can't think of what the patrol when you first get on, you're with your training officer. You know what I'm saying? You're with your first training officer till you become a beat cop. You know what I'm saying? Until you. That's the emphasis of why there was so much of a push of getting more Black people in the realm of law enforcement and getting them into these cities so they can be able to have a better relationship with police than to continue to have someone outside of the community that's being taught these people are just, I don't care what they doing, you got to treat them as such. You know what I mean? And they are being
but I want to acknowledge that that's different than I acknowledge that that's different than way back in the day, like or in the 70s and in the 60s, where they could be so much upfront about like, yeah, these niggas in their nigga community, and we are treating them a certain kind of way and getting away with a lot more heinous stuff. The severity was obviously different. I can admit that, like, duh, and I can appreciate the progress in that too, but. He was specifically using the word frequency, and I don't think the frequency has changed. I think that people are still doing microaggression, still doing shit to Black people, still.
No, I agree. There are some that are.
Hold on. At the same rate.
It may not be at the same rate because you have now everything is filmed.
It's just a different. For example,
everything is filmed now.
But that implicates the question of frequency. How often it's happening, that implicates that question. So that's what I'm trying to get as to, like I want to hunker down on this. Like if you're saying that we've made progress, that things are way less overt, but somehow inexplicably the frequency with which these kinds of injustices are perpetrated against Black people has remained the same, if not increased. Is weird. That's a very bizarre
so what I'm
thing
saying
to
is
think.
that the amount of Black people who are probably just pulled out and actually killed, or Black people who are being abused and actually physically harassed has probably gone down. But the amount of Black people just being harassed, being verbally harassed, or being more policed, or still being seen as being treated as less than human has remained. So all I'm saying is that it went from me being able to slap you, Jason, to me now being able to just like give you that extra ticket or whatever because I'm trying to make quotas or whatever, and it's more systemic and it's more sophisticated. But that doesn't mean that the frequency has gone down. It just means the severity has gone down. That's all I'm saying. But what I do want to talk about is what I think you were going with the question originally is I do have an issue with the way that we sensationalize specifically Black male death for the benefit of these people who say they're being down for the cause, and they're just being fucking greedy. And they're just capitalizing off of the deaths of Black people. And so the news people are capitalizing on it because they get to sensationalize and meet their numbers and continue their commercial endorsements, right? The politics get to go, specifically to her point, Democrats get to hop on and wear freaking kente, whatever old girl did, wear kente and make it seem, and throw the Black power fist and make it seem like they're down, right? And then continue to take advantage of the Black vote as a voting block, right? And we play into that shit, right? And then, but this is the one that she's going in on that I completely agree with. And shout out to Kendrick Lamar because he was saying that a minute ago, is that a lot of these people who say that they're doing the groundwork people that we see on the protesters, there's this hegemony within that in which the people at top are just literally similar to like a Teach for America, capitalizing off the misery and trauma of Black male death. And
I agree with you.
I agree 1,000% with you.
I agree too. I think that there are people who are.
She's right in that. She's right in that sense. Like, it sucks that she's going about it in a particular kind of way, but I'm open enough to say, like, you know what? We need to, and you know what? We need to call out the OGs, so the Al Sharptons and the Reverend and the Jesse Jacksons and all of them, because they've been doing the shit. Even much respect to John Lewis, but him too. Like, all of them, right?
I think
to capitalize off a particular narrative and a particular thing of making it seem like they're fighting for something when really they're just benefiting. And now she's talking about specifically the Black Lives Matter. Black women have been, I will say first, that Black women have been in this very sincere way on the front lines of all of our civil rights movements and all of our movements. But right now, and it's something that I've experienced with myself, is that because the ways that Black women interact with white supremacy differently than Black men, and how the way that it reacts to us, at least, Black women have been capitalizing off of our deaths.
Or I want to be careful.
Not even just in the extreme of death, capitalizing off of us not doing well. So even in the school systems.
Yeah, but I don't know that that's careful enough. I do think that there's a substantive critique to be had about the ways in which people take advantage of tragedy, particularly tragedy among black men dying by the hands of police officers. That there's a substantive critique there. There are many instances that I think that we could cite if we were careful enough, where the ways in which people went about raising awareness in ways that pretty exclusively profited them monetarily, we would probably criticize, including but not limited to the Al Sharptons and et cetera, people you name. However, I don't know that every instance where money is received by people who are grieving or people who are the family members of lost loved ones, I don't want to lump that under the umbrella of profit.
Yeah, and I wasn't trying to. If I came off that way, I'm not trying to lump those into there. I just mean that there needs to be a critique of
who's starting these funds.
I'm talking about people who successfully have won lawsuits to get who are awarded damages. I'm talking about people who have received donations
I'm all for financial compensation, and I'm all for reparations, and I'm all for all that. What I'm saying is that there should be no reason why, only because George Floyd died, you get to buy a $3 million house.
Okay, fair enough. So we agree on that. But I'm trying to be careful, tediously careful, because the way that you were speaking before, one could reasonably interpret it the way I just illustrated. And I'm not trying to attribute that to you falsely, but I want to be very careful about what we are talking about. We're talking about a subset of the cases where people earn things or profit monetarily, which I take for granted that that's what you meant the whole
Okay,
time.
let me be a little bit more specific. I mean, a lot of these organizations, a lot of these nonprofit organizations, similar to what Candace Owens did, need to continue to show the spotlight on, well, what the fuck is really going on, and how are you actually serving the community that you say that you're serving, because from my actual experience with not just Black Lives Matter, but and not just Black organizations, but people who say that they're doing things for people who are poor and all that kind of stuff. I just think that because there really are people doing their work and, like, you know, making those sacrifices. And also I will say that I don't believe that just because you're an activist, you deserve to be poor. I'm just saying that there is, and again, you know what? There's an Atlanta episode I recommend you guys watch. That again talks about when Paperboy goes and something happens to him racially or whatever, they want him to go and endorse this. He wants to go and endorse the people. So it's like basically the Ralph Lauren. He said something. He got caught saying something out of pocket. So now he's trying to get all the rappers around him to say that, oh no, he's actually cool, and say that he's apologized or whatever, right? Doing this public apology, and they actually go in and start talking to the people who are the activists who are running the show on, like, oh yeah, well, every time something happens, we know how to capitalize off of it. It's a whole fucking thing. At this point, it's cliche. It's a thing where, like, tragedy happens.
Well,
white people want to apologize. They go to these certain movers and shakers who are gonna give them the okay, like, hey, don't worry about it, they cool.
Well, do you feel similarly about, and I'm just curious to see if you would apply it this way, even though it's a little off topic. Do you feel similarly about Colin Kaepernick and the endorsement from Nike in the wake of him getting, you know, blackballed from the NFL?
Can I
think
answer that?
There's a similar kind of grifting there, or do you think that was legitimate?
Can I answer that first?
Go ahead, Dre.
Well,
I'm
gonna answer that, and I'm gonna say no, because the only reason why I'm gonna say no is because I've been following his organizations and where that money is going and how he's donating that money into the community. Now, the endorsement from Nike and stuff like that, he's still putting that in the Know Your Rights fund. Now, you know what I'm saying? He has still, and I get it. Nike endorsed him. He pays some money so he can be able to get the jerseys or whatever. He still has to be able to take care of his family. So I'm not mad at that. At the same time, he still put, where donations is going with the Know Your Rights camp over with Black Lives. And I didn't even have to see the Candace Owens video to be able to not follow this for the last couple of years, is what Black Lives Matter has been putting their money at. And it's not in the infrastructure in the inner city either. I know that.
What percentage of the $30 million that he got from Nike is he putting into his organization?
I mean, I don't know the percentage.
Wouldn't that help us evaluate better and more accurately to what extent?
Even if he put 10% of it, that's $3 million in that organization, right? So if you put $3 million in that organization, will it matter?
But if he only put 10K, if he only put 10,000 of it,
even if it's 10,
I will say that's why I was saying yes. I do think that it does matter, Jason. I do, but I will say that Colin Kaepernick's situation is different because he actually sacrificed his career. Like,
right in the Know Your Rights organization, he did sacrifice. You got to give him.
What do you mean? He sacrificed his career. He actually made a sacrifice.
His career to get the endorsement from Nike.
No. What I'm saying, is that
but he was blackballed. Why?
Yeah, because
he was black. He was go ahead.
Well, he was okay. So he got blackballed. Wasn't nobody gonna hire him. Nike was invested in what the movie he was doing.
Nobody was going to hire him as a starting quarterback. People were.
They weren't going to hire him. Period. They weren't. Let's keep it real.
That's not true.
If that was the case, if that was the case, the Raiders would have. If that was the case, the Raiders would have been. He would have been the backup quarterback for the Raiders.
He actually got offers from 2 franchises, but the problem was they offered him roles as a backup which he didn't.
He was
want.
never going to be a star. He was never going to be a
starter.
Okay, so
but you need to make that qualification.
He was never going to be a starter. He was never going to. He was never going to play. And the reason why he was never going to. He was never.
That detail does not actually matter.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Yes, it does.
No,
it doesn't. He made a sacrifice by doing
it's the difference between saying he was not offered a job and he was.
Wait a minute. Who goes in? What quarterback do you know that with the caliber of talent in the resume that's going to go in as a backup quarterback anyway? A quarterback who went to the Super Bowl.
The former backup quarterback of the Tennessee Titans, or excuse me, of the Raiders, who came from the Titans, Marcus Mariota, did that. Did he not?
He never went to a Super Bowl. He never went to a Super Bowl. It was one play.
Fine.
None of that. He
was never a Pro Bowler.
So he's not as good as Colin Kaepernick because he never went to a Super Bowl once, I guess.
He never went to
the
a
point
Super
I'm making
Bowl.
Is he accepted a backup role before now getting a starting role. So the idea that once you're a backup, you can never be a starter again is just false. One. Two, Colin Kaepernick was blackballed. I'll give you that. But to say
you can't say he was blackballed. You can't say it was blackballed. You can't say he wouldn't take a job.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like,
no, yes, you can.
I'm saying he was blackballed from the mechanics of what was going to actually happen.
Hold on, stop. What I'm saying he was blackballed from was the starting position specifically. Okay, that's different from saying that he wasn't offered a job at all. That's not true. So the only thing I'm objecting to is the idea that he wasn't getting any offers for any jobs at all. That's it. That's still consistent with him being blackballed from a particular position which he had occupied prior to that, which was the starting position as a quarterback. Right? Those are consistent. There's nothing mutually exclusive about those things.
He was never
bringing you back on.
He was never going to get a job. He was never going to get a job because they felt that, especially with the media coverage, that he was going. The media and the people in the city was going to treat him worse than they treated Michael Vick, even with his dog information. So I believe that that's false.
You believe what's false?
That you're saying that that he was going to get a job and he just could have came in as a backup. They would have the media, the local media, no matter where he would have went, the local media was going to destroy this dude because of the media narrative. And the teams did not want to. Those teams did not want to deal with that. Let's just keep it real.
Wait, I didn't say that. What I said was the idea that once you are a backup that you can never be a starter again doesn't make sense. That just doesn't follow.
What teams
now it's reasonable to
role?
Believe. Okay, but so I think the Jaguars was one of them. I can look it up though because I don't want to. Why does he keep leaving and coming back? What I don't want to say it wrong, so I'll look it up. But he was offered from 2 teams, and it was not very likely that he was going to get a starting position on those teams, right? So in that sense, he was blackballed from being in a starting position or being a starting quarterback, right? But like the idea that because he was blackballed from being a starter, that means that he would never be able to be offered a job again is just wrong because he was actually offered contracts from 2 teams.
He was not offered a contract when he went to Seattle. When he went and got that, when he went and Seattle, Pete Carroll was saying, "Oh yeah, we'll sign this dude." Blah 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 blah. We'll give him a try. Nobody was giving this dude a tryout. That's why he hosted his own tryout and did what he did for the media and said, "I still got it. I still this." And 26 of those teams came in, and 24 of them left because my team was a part of that. They went to go look at Kaepernick train over in Georgia. So the narrative that this dude was just offered these jobs and this was gonna happen is false. It's false. I was watching the whole thing. It was false.
Okay, I got the receipts, so I'll just show it right now. I don't know where Malik went. Hopefully he comes back. But here, I'll just show. So this is from John Elway. This is from Bleacher Report. Hold on, let me see what happened with him. All right, so according to this Bleacher Report article, and I'll blow it up a little bit. So Denver Broncos general manager John Elway said Thursday that free Colin Kaepernick had an opportunity to sign with the team. This was in August of 2018. In 2016, Elway told reporters that the Broncos had made an offer to Kaepernick. According to CSN Bay Area's Mindy Bach, the contract would have paid Kaepernick $7 million per season for 2 seasons. Anyway, another thing, the reason why he, I think, rejected it was because it wasn't that much money, to be fair. Since parting ways with San Francisco 49ers at the end of 2016 season, Kaepernick has gone unsigned. So that's at least one team.
It said they made him an offer.
Yeah,
after
an actual contract offer, and he didn't want it.
They made him an offer. What
For
was
$7 million.
in the starting quarterback at that time was Drew Lock.
In 2018, I have no idea who it was.
It was Drew Lock.
I don't think he would have. I don't think he would. Well, it's vague because when you offer a quarterback,
because
they compete or whatever. But I actually think it's reasonable to doubt that he would have been a starting quarterback team.
Because John Elway, as the general manager, said we offered him a contract, but there was nothing substantial on that claim. Just like Pete Carroll saying we offered him a tryout, and there was nothing substantial on that claim. Because I can say, oh yeah, we offer, we gauged them. We could do, because that's what Pete Carroll said. Oh, we gauged them, but were you really serious about really gauging this guy? If John Elway was really serious about that, they would have brought him in for a tryout. I think that was blowing smoke. What we call blowing smoke, that was blowing smoke. Because Drew Lock was the quarterback at that time. And we all know Colin Kaepernick is way better than Drew Lock. It could have been, matter of fact, it probably wasn't Drew Lock. It was probably Brock Osweiler. What I'm saying, it could have been Brock Osweiler or Peyton Lynch or whoever it was. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, you're preaching to the choir, but the point I'm making is he got blackballed from the starting position, but to say he didn't get offered any jobs is just factually incorrect. Unless you're saying John Elway lied.
I don't believe they offered him a contract because Colin.
So John Elway lied.
I believe
John
so.
Elway lied.
Yeah, just to save face.
Well, I mean, if that's your claim, okay, fine. If that's your claim, I didn't realize you were saying that, but you would need evidence for that to prove it. But fine, if you're going to say John Elway lied, that's fine.
Just like they said, they told reporters they made him an offer. What other evidence you have that did you bring him in for a tryout? If y'all made him an offer in 217, 20.
Wait. The Broncos did bring him in for a tryout. The Broncos did bring him in for a tryout, and several teams did, by the way.
When?
Not just the Broncos.
What was this? Because he held a public tryout. He held a public tryout.
Yeah, but that was after 2018. That was in what, 2020, 2019? I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was after that. It was during the pandemic. But yeah, so it says since parting with the San Francisco 49ers in the 2016 season, Kaepernick has gone unsigned. The Broncos' contact with Kaepernick occurred when he was still with the Niners and before he began kneeling during the playing of the national anthem to protest social injustice and racial inequality. Instead of acquiring Kaepernick and signing him to a new deal, Denver went with Trevor Siemian and his starting quarterback for parts for 2 seasons. This offseason, Denver traded Siemian to the Minnesota Vikings and signed former Vikes signal caller Case Keenum. Since the conclusion of the 2016 season, reported interest in Kaepernick across the NFL was negligible. The Baltimore Ravens held talks with Kaepernick last year, so that would have been 2017.
Yeah,
right?
I remember
and the
that.
Seattle Seahawks scheduled a workout with him in April, but it was postponed because he didn't show up, right?
No. Pete Carroll went in and said, "Yeah, we'll let her have Kaepernick and this, that, and the other," and then they turned around and canceled on him. I remember that.
Okay, fair
and
enough.
The whole thing with Baltimore, the whole thing with Baltimore is John Harbaugh came out and said, "Yeah, we'll give Kaepernick a try. We'll do this, that, and the other," and then turn around and
he also got to work out with the Raiders.
Well, I know that, and he didn't make it. And by that time, you know what I'm saying, he's been out the league for 5 years, so it didn't even matter. So the whole Denver thing was before the kneeling. The whole thing with Baltimore was after, and then John Harbaugh said, "Yeah, we'll bring him in, and we got this, and we'll do this, that, and the other." And they end up signing Robert Griffin III, and they signed some other jabroni that was there too. You know what I mean? Oh no, that was Seattle that signed some other jabroni that nobody even cared about. You know what I'm saying? At that time too. So my whole point was the $30 million was, and to get, because we kind of went way off subject, was to say yes. Kaepernick getting the $30 million from Nike, that was for him. That wasn't for know your rights. That was for him. It wasn't for the Know Your Rights camp. It wasn't, it wasn't like you were donating to be able to. It wasn't donations to be able to give to these organizations or whatever. It wasn't what Black Lives Matter did. and we have to separate the two. He signed a contract with Nike so they can endorse his jersey, and I think it was a shoe. And that's what the deal was. And now what he did with that money was, as far as donating or whatever, you know what I'm saying, was on him after that. But that contract was for him. Not like Black Lives Matter. It wasn't a donation. It wasn't like people was giving out their pocket. And then he went and just bought stuff. So I think we have to make sure that narrative is put out there.
That's fair. I think it's to correct myself. I think it's fair to point out that I was wrong about the timing of when he was offered by the Broncos. He was offered by the Broncos before he started kneeling, and that's not trivial. So I want to acknowledge that because I'm not trying to hide that. But I could have sworn, but other than the Raiders more recently, I could have sworn there were a couple of other teams that not only worked him out, but offered at least two teams. So I'm still trying to find that right now.
Nobody offered him a contract.
Also, didn't he opt out of his last year with the Niners? So he could have gone all the way to 2017.
Well, this is the situation with John Lynch. For what I understand, is that they were, especially this was on the cusp of them having a losing season. Colin Kaepernick, even though his numbers were not horrible, you know what I mean, it wasn't as good as the previous season. I can't think of the coach offhand, but they were going to make wholesale changes anyway, and they were bringing in Mike Shanahan or Cal Shanahan. So they were going to make wholesale changes, and John Lynch basically let them know that, hey, you're not going to be a part of these plans going forward. So that was a conversation that they had. Colin made a move, thinking he was going to get another job, even though the protest was going on, you know, the kneeling and all of that caused that stir with the kneeling. You know what I mean? So nobody offered him anything.
What about the workout that he had planned with several different teams? There were scouts for several NFL teams, and he didn't go. How do you think that?
Okay, so that was what, 2020, where he scheduled the workout that he went. It was supposed to be in at the Atlanta Falcons workout facility, and then he moved it to some like high school that was 20 minutes away, and he pissed off everybody. It's because what he didn't want to do was paint a narrative. He didn't want the media to paint a narrative that he's washed up, he's this, he's that. So we made it more open. And I want to say 26 NFL teams sent scouts there to go watch him. And
so those don't count as workouts for those with respect to those teams?
That's because they didn't offer to take him in. He offered them he said, watch me work out. They wasn't calling him. That's the difference. If I'm begging for
but they set up But they set up a workout in the middle of the season.
And I remember Shannon Sharp said this. They did it out of fallacy because of everything that happened with George Floyd. And now because people were kneeling now.
Oh, I agree with that.
After Colin has been out the league, people were kneeling now because of the whole George Floyd situation. Well, let's give this dude so we can save face because we're using his slogans and we're using his thing. Let's go ahead and save face and let's do it as a gesture.
I agree. I think
that was the problem with Colin had. Colin was like, no.
I think that the PR shifted because of the George Floyd protests, and that put pressure on the NFL to try to make it seem as if they weren't blackballing him for racial reasons. Exactly. You're right about that. I agree. However, the only thing I was pointing out was, fine, they blackballed him and then they tried to damage control, but they still offered him a workout in the middle of the year, which is unprecedented. And in some ways, to compensate for the. No, but that's what I'm saying. I think it was meant to compensate for his extenuating, unique circumstances. And to me, it was kind of an admission of guilt, to your point. But like, fine, they blackballed him, which I've been saying this entire time. They gave him a workout, and then on top, like, what was awkward about that was he didn't participate in the workout, and that gave them a whole bunch of excuses they wouldn't have otherwise have had.
No, what he did was he moved the workout. They were all supposed to meet at the Atlanta training facility.
But he did it unilaterally and with only a couple hours notice. But he did it unilaterally with only a couple hours notice.
Yeah, he did it. You know, I'm not saying, you know, the communication was right. I'm not saying the communication that he did just to move it was right. But I do understand a closed workout facility, and then they're writing this narrative saying he's trash, he's this, he's that, he's this, he's that. So he wanted to make, because they went in, one of the main reasons why they moved it is because he was going to use his camera crew to film it, and they was like, nah, I don't want to. You know what I'm saying? I don't want no, you can't use your camera crew. We're going to use ours. And he was like, nah, I'm not with that. Nah, I'm cool. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, he felt like they were trying to play him, which I can't be mad at that. So he made a move. And was it the best move for him at the time? He probably is thinking, yeah. But we already knew that nobody schedules a workout in the middle of the season with 26 NFL teams. Nobody does that. If you need a quarterback, you're going to bring him in. You're going to work him out yourself. And then if it works out, kudos. If it doesn't, the guys go right back on the street until another team who loses their quarterback calls them and say, hey, you know what I'm saying? Come in and get a workout. Blake Bortles was a starting quarterback of the Jacksonville Jaguars.
But do you don't think that was a legitimate opportunity? Is that what you're saying?
No, that was some bull crap. That was some bull. It was some bull job.
Do you think he helped that situation at all by moving it?
No, I mean, it exposed it even more. Because if they were really looking for a quarterback, no matter if they would have had it at the Atlanta training facility or on the moon, if you really wanted that quarterback, you're gonna get what you want. Tyreek Hill was drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs, even though he had a case in Oklahoma for you know what I'm saying, for pleading no contest to strangulation. So if you want somebody, you're gonna go get them. Let's stop the narrative that if you don't want something, you're not going to get it. So if they wanted him to be a quarterback, he would have been a quarterback in somebody's team, no matter what he would have did. Prime example of that was Philadelphia going to go get Michael Vick. Prime example of that.
I agree with you. But there is some interesting questions about why they didn't want him. I think that most teams didn't want him because they didn't want to deal with the PR nightmare.
Thank you.
And I think that they also, a lot of the owners are ideologically opposed to the kneeling and stuff.
Yeah,
for racial justice,
how many?
But I do think that there are some owners that were more amenable to it than others. I do think that there were certain coaches that were more amenable to it than others.
But their GMs,
and I just feel like he would have Yeah, I agree with that about the GMs. But what I'm saying is, I think he probably would have maximized his ability to get signed at that time if he would have just did the workout. Now, the other thing that I read about was he didn't want to sign there was some kind of document he didn't want to sign that because he had an ongoing litigating case against the NFL that would have undermined that. Yeah. So because of that, he decided not to do it. I don't know why he waited so close to the date, but he decided not to do it. That was a big reason that was cited. That to me is the most understandable reason, but I don't think it explains why he waited so long, because a couple hours beforehand.
Just riddle me this: who's going to hire you if you're suing them? If I'm suing McDonald's, they're not going to hire me to go shake fries, knowing I have an ongoing lawsuit against them. And remember, he had an ongoing lawsuit against the NFL. So all of that, because of the George Floyd situation and everything was going on, was to save face. To say, and just to give the narrative, we gave him a workout. And he decided to do this and the other to really paint him more in the bad light. Well, he decided they brought what was the former coach of the Cincinnati Bengals, the black guy.
I don't know.
They brought him down. He got pissed off. And then they publicly flambasted him on television. I can't think of his name. The former coach of the Cincinnati Bengals, who was the defensive coordinator of the Baltimore Ravens, because he was going to act in the factor of the Baltimore Ravens, him and Ray Lewis. And then Ray Lewis went on, well, the brother shouldn't have did this, and he shouldn't have did that, and we was going to give him a job, and we was going to do this, and we was going to do that. Ray Lewis, you wasn't going to do nothing because you're not the general manager. You're not Ozzie. You're not the new general manager that was coming in after Ozzie. You're not John Harbaugh. All you are is a former player who would have probably had a little bit more leeway as far as a voice, but you're not hiring nobody.
Here, I gotta concede some stuff. Well, I haven't done a thorough research, but I wasn't able to find what I vaguely remember. I think it was Shannon Sharp that said that he was offered from at least two teams. He was offered by the Broncos, but that was before he started kneeling. I can't see any examples where he was offered contracts by teams after he started kneeling. And the only other workout that I know that he had was with the Raiders. So
and that was last. And
for
that was
now, I
that
can't
was
argue.
and that was in the off season. This past off season, after being out the league for 5 years.
Yeah, 5-6 years after the fact.
Yeah.
So I can't at this point prove that he was offered contracts by teams after he kneeled, but prior to this most recent workout, and even with that, I don't know that the Raiders ever offered him a contract.
They didn't.
To be fair,
they just offered him a workout.
So I guess for now, temporarily, tentatively, because it could change if I find more information, I got to concede that point. I do think that there's nuance there around whether or not he added insult to injury. I do think that he was blackballed. I do think that he probably could have gotten some backup spots somewhere, but he wasn't willing to take it because he had a certain amount of money he was shooting for.
But I don't believe that narrative. Well, I mean, you could say anybody's going to shoot for whatever money that they feel like they're owed. Why would you come in and take anything less, especially if they're telling you basically to shut up and ball? Because I'm not saying he should have done it. I'm saying I think that if he would have settled, he could have gotten on the team. Because remember, he's suing the NFL, which includes all 32 owners, and they're asking him, "Are you still going to kneel?" So if he made it clear as day, I'm not going to stop kneeling until things change.
And then also there were a lot of other players that kneeled that are still in the NFL.
But they didn't. But they're not calling Kaepernick. It's kind of like
I'm saying that's more evidence that he got blackballed because he was treated differently from all those other people.
Exactly.
So we agree that he got blackballed. I just think that if he would have settled, he could have gotten a backup job for sure. That's how I feel. That's my opinion right now. But yeah, I can't find any proof that he was offered contracts like I said earlier. So I have to concede that. Back to the topic proper, and then I'm gonna get you out of here because I know you got to go. So
I'm sorry. Because I'm looking at one of the questions that you had, and this kind of goes back to let me see. Hold on. I think it was like, was Derek is it Chauvin slander unjustly by the media? Chauvin slander unjustly by the media as an evil person unfairly, or that the condition merely a spin that the documentary puts on Chauvin were verifiable facts about Chauvin support your stance. Because I wanted to go into that because again, and before the guy left, when you're what's it, Tariq? Was that a name?
Malik,
I'm sorry. With the media spin, you have, like I said, I know this personally because this happened to me. Because the title of the art, I'll never forget this. Because for one, I was a blip on the when it happened. It was a little bitty article in the Kansas City Star that was like this big about me. But then once they found out this kid did all of this other extra stuff outside of the charge that I got, it was good kid went bad. How does a good kid go bad? Or some narrative spin. And tried to spin it as that I'm just this kid who did all of this great stuff, and then all of a sudden I'm a monster. And I understand two things could be true. Derek Chauvin probably was a really good cop. He probably was. I don't know. He could have been a really good cop, right? He could have made a horrible decision on allowing his ego control that situation because he was being jabbed at, which I know personally. Cops, I've worked with cops, and I've been on the other side of cops. Cops will treat you a certain different way. Like when I was a corrections officer, I had a cop pull me over I bought a car. It was a used car. Didn't know the tail light went out like a week after I got it. When he went and pulled me over and pulled me out the car, treated me totally different until I gave him my wallet and my badge was in there. But then it was a totally different attitude. I had a cop. I'm just sitting at the bus station. Two cops driving around the corner, flip me off. I'm looking inside of the car while they're flipping me off. I've also had cops that was cool as a fan. So you do have the narrative that this guy could have been a good cop and let his ego get to him. Because I know how I was trained by Kansas City Police Department. I was post-8 trained, and I was trained on how to be able to do a criminal if he's I call it wet fishing, when they're flopping all around and stuff like that. And you're trying to get control, and you put that arm, you grab them by in the palm of their hand, or you grab, because the reason why you're grabbing them the palm of your hand, because it's hard to lock your fingers. If you grab them at a pressure point, and you could be able to twist your wrist to put their hands behind their back, put the base of your forearm on their neck to get them and subdue them on the ground. You know what I'm saying? And if you can't, and if you're a smaller guy, like I'm 5'9", 170, you're a smaller guy like me, you call for backup. You know what I'm saying? One cop puts the knee again on the side or on the back, but not so much pressure that you're crushing their spine. You're getting them there so you could be able to stop him from flopping. But you're constantly saying, sir, stop resisting, stop flopping. I'm not trying to hurt. You're constantly reminding them to just calm down. We're not going to hurt you. Just calm down. We're going to get you in the back of the car. Calm down. You know what I'm saying? And we're going to get you up. You know what I mean? We're trying to calm them down so we don't escalate the situation. We're trying to de-escalate. That's what part of communication and verbal judo that I was taught. You know what I'm saying? Where you're giving commands. Sir, this is what I'm getting ready to do. Sir, if you just do this, this is going to happen. Sir, if you come with me over here, this is not going to happen. You automatically see it de-escalate once he said he was claustrophobic in the car, which was some bullcrap because we already know he was in the car. And I agree with Candace. That was some bullcrap. And with the one guy who was speaking or whatever and talking about how everything went down. Yeah, we know it was some bull crap. He could have gotten in the back of that car. You understand? Because he was sitting in his car when it happened. At that point, if you know this guy is being erratic, he's all over the place. It could be drugs, it could be mental health. You are not the expert on that. So you don't know. What you want to do is try to de-escalate by talking him down. You know what I'm saying? You have a cop behind him. You know what I'm saying? In what we call a wide stance. So your feet is in between his feet. So you widen out his stance. You put your strongest leg, your right or your left, if you're right-handed or left-handed, you get on the side of him. So even if he's handcuffed, if he runs or anything, you literally can trip him up, because your feet is in between his. So if he runs, you can cross your legs. You're putting him down. That's his fault. You know what I mean? But you're still finding ways to de-escalate the situation.
One quick note about Derek Chauvin. I don't know that I trust the depiction of Derek Chauvin from the documentary. It seems to have all the hallmarks of spin that a lot of the regular media has, but in the opposite direction. There seem to be some nuances there that seem to be there to consider. I don't know if he deserves 25 years in prison, but some kind of accountability I think probably he does deserve. So I think the biggest the probably one of the accomplishments of the George Floyd movement was they applied enough pressure in a very public trial to result in the sentence that he got, because it would have looked really, really bad if he would have gotten anything less harsh. And some people even weren't even satisfied with that. That said, I actually want to switch gears. I want to know before we get out of here, because I got to go soon, what your thoughts were on what the documentary, what Candace revealed specifically about the use of the funds that Black Lives Matter garnered. Do you think that at least some, if not all of those things that were cited were justified use of those funds? Were they misuse of the funds? Like, what do you think?
Misuse. Extreme misuse. To pull on the heart, for one, to pull on the heartstrings of Black America, knowing that the height of, I won't say, because this is always going on as far as like Blacks being shot. We can go back to the 60s, the 70s. Malcolm X holding up the paper, about the kid that was murdered. Fred Hampton. We can go down the list. So this is nothing new. But to escalate the situation to the point of now we're getting money, getting these donations and pulling on the heartstrings, and not utilizing that money for the right reasons, using that money to fund LGBT, which that that's been said for God knows how long, that the two women that started Black Lives Matter was part of the LGBT community, and they were going to use that funds for that. I don't.
According to Candace though, it seems like only, let's see, something like 2.8 million, 2.6, 2.8 million of the 90 million went towards either trans or LGBT causes.
What does that have to do with police brutality?
Well, I don't know, but I mean,
Yeah,
I guess
that's
what I'm
what
trying to point out is it's a small percentage of the total.
It doesn't matter.
So is it much to do about nothing insofar as it wasn't like the biggest thing that they donated, they used their money for was investing in stock markets. 32 million. That's almost half. Well, really, it's a third if you count 90. The statement she had only had 80 recorded on there, but they reportedly got north of 90.
Yeah.
So there's 10 plus million unaccounted for.
Yeah.
But out of the 90, if you want to go with 90, if only 2.6 million, which is a 30th or something, they're at like close to that. One might be able to argue that focusing in on that narrowly is in some sense missing the big picture, because the majority of their funds might have went elsewhere. What do you say to something like that?
You said 90 million went to, they got accounted for 90 million, but 2.6 million was donated to LGBT.
2.3 million.
2.3 million. So
yeah.
So my question.
No, sorry, you're right. No, you had it right the first time. 2.6 million. Sorry,
so if 2.6 million, let me see, because I'm trying to. So if 10% of that is 9 million, of 90 is 9 million. So it's less than. It's about 3%, right? Let's just call it 3%. So what does that have to do with police brutality?
Well, I'm playing devil's advocate because I basically just agree with you, but I'm saying I'm replicating a certain kind of logic that a lot of people use, which is like when it came to the protests, a lot of people cited that 93 or 97% of the Black Lives Matter protests were mostly peaceful, and they didn't involve rioting and looting and stuff like that. Right. So focusing in on the 3% to 7% that weren't peaceful is myopic, and all you're doing is you're hurting the movement when you focus on that. An analogous argument might be say that out of the 90 million, only 3% of it went towards LGBTQ stuff.
But those are totally. But see, those are totally different. If you look at it in a logical way, those are two totally different settings, right? So you got a peaceful protest going on, but some idiot is doing something reckless over here. You know what I mean? That those two, I don't think equate to. I donate money to you. And those funds were supposed to be allocated to, to raise awareness or to have things that go on for the Black community. So that's just like, if you give me, that's just like, I give you a prime example. I pay child support. So I pay $500 a month for child support, and you take $30 and go buy cigarettes with that every month. You know what I'm saying? Is cigarettes for the child? Is it not that funds supposed to be allocated for the child or for your own personal things that you want to do? Now, remind you, $30 ain't nothing if you still got $470 left. But is it all supposed to go? Is all supposed to go?
But to be fair, donating to a general movement or a cause is not quite the same as child support, because child support is very specific and narrow. Giving to a general cause is not necessarily as specific and narrow. And with Black Lives Matter, you have to take into account that at least a subsection of the Black community are also members of the LGBTQ community. So
okay, but my question, and I get that, and like it's pointed out in the documentary, that these people were having retreats, and some of these people who was getting donated was training protesters, and you know what I'm saying, and all this other stuff. And when I look outside and I see the inner city, I don't see buildings going up especially in Minnesota where that happened at. I didn't hear anything about a new facility was started up with 30 to 40 million of that money so they could be able to give so a children's fund could be there, or an inner city community center could be there, so children at youth risk could be able to have somewhere to go. I didn't see a clothing drive being done. I didn't see any of that money being done at where the situation happened at. Did George Floyd's family get any of that money?
That's a good question. I don't know.
You see what I'm saying? So if you can allocate the money to LGBT trans situations that had nothing to do with George Floyd, then why couldn't you allocate those funds to a community center, to an outreach program? Why are you taking $34 million and giving it to the stock market, where you could have been starting to, you could have got with my man Dr. Umar. It could have started the school. He's been looking for money. What I'm saying is that if we're saying, oh, 2.6 million is a blip in the bucket, you know what I mean? Yeah, but those funds could have been allocated for something more, like rebuilding of a school in the inner city, in George Floyd's honor. That money could have been allocated so many ways. So yes, the responsibility of Black Lives Matter is to be able to get that $90 million and allocate the funds to wherever they want to, but don't get mad when you get criticized where those funds is going. And the same area that you're saying that you want police reform and all of that is still dealing with stuff now. And before we go, I wanted to pull up the article that I was looking at. Minneapolis is from time that Minneapolis is still struggling 2 years after George Floyd's murder. Minneapolis is still struggling to redefine policing. So if there was so much of an issue with policing, where is that funds at to be able to work with the community and get something together where you're not having those particular issues? You're not having, blood gangs and stuff like that, because you're really using that money to clean up the streets, So that's where I have a problem at.
All right, we got to wrap up because I got to go soon. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being it's the best documentary you've ever seen, 1 being it's the worst, what would you give this documentary?
I give it a 6. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen. It's not the greatest thing I've ever seen in the world, but it's not the worst thing I've ever seen in the world. I do have my problems, but
I actually agree with you. I would give it a 6, maybe a 6.5, but in there, not quite a 7. All right. Well, I want you to get a chance to say your final goodbyes to my audience, and we'll get out of here.
All right. So if you guys want to check out some movie reviews, comic book movie reviews, blurred information, make sure to check out the Dre Max Show on YouTube. I got a video that I'm probably going to do tonight if I'm not too sleepy, because I don't have to work on Monday. Just talking about creative decisions and how creative decisions can make or break a franchise. And I'm starting with Transformers, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and the Black Panther franchise, tying those all together and why creative decisions can make.
Your mic went out. No, I can't hear you. I don't know what just happened. I don't know. You adjusted something, and now I can't hear you. I don't know what just happened. That's random. Is your thing muted? I'm gonna bring you off and bring you back on. Let me try that. Hello? Say something? Wow, I can't hear you at all. That's weird. This is random.
It froze up.
You're good now.
Yeah, it just froze up on me.
Okay.
Oh,
right. Go ahead and go back into it. Go ahead and go back. Yeah. Sorry.
So check me out on the Dre Max Show on YouTube. I'm doing a video about how creative decisions can make or break a franchise. I'm talking about the first segment of this. I'm talking about Transformers, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and how that is compared to the Black Panther franchise going forward. So make sure you guys check that out. I'll be doing that video tomorrow. It will tonight, and it will air sometime tomorrow evening. So make sure to check me out. Again, it's the Dre Mac Show, or go to my IG page, The Real Dre Mac, and make sure to give your boy a follow, and let's talk about it there.
Dope, man. And I want to thank you for participating today. I think Malik left in a huff because I brought him off screen while he was interrupting me. I brought it back on, but I think that's probably why he left. So I'll try to talk to him about that. But thank you, man. Always a pleasure. If you ever want to come back, feel free. And hopefully we can do a collab about the more blurred stuff, because I do.
Yeah, let's do some blurred stuff, man. Let's do this. So
all right, man. I'm gonna bring you off, and then I'm gonna close out.
All right.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Black Muze Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Muse, aka the Black Muse. That was fun. I'm leaving in a little bit of a rush because I got to go tend to some things, but I did have a good time with this, and maybe I'll be able to put another panel together, and we can do another part in the series to continue to talk about all the things we didn't explore about the documentary. All right, until next time, though, peace.